Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned. We've returned late. I was supposed to have a video up on Wednesday, and also I was going to have something up on Thursday. But look, it's Friday, and, well, we're here on Friday, so I guess that's all I can say. But I'm here for a very important reason, because I got a really interesting thing in the mail. And this really interesting thing was sent to me by the great Troy Tradup. Troy Tradup, the author of Protect Me from the Things I Think I Want. That's Troy Tradup there, fairly recent photo of Troy Tradup. And he is also, of course, the author of the greatest werewolf novel of the 21st century. That would be The Forsaken Boy. If you haven't read The Forsaken Boy, you should order that book and read it because it's awesome. So he wrote these books. He's got a book of poetry coming out pretty soon. And he also has a booktube channel of his own, which is a lot classier than mine. Hard to believe, Roger, but it's true. I'll link his channel down below. But Troy sent me something. Now, Troy will occasionally send me really, really nice things. He sent me, for example, probably one of the greatest things in my library, which is this. This is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This is the original manuscript. The original manuscript for Frankenstein, which has been reproduced in this gigantic fancy pants volume. This once resided in Troy Tradup's library, and he sent it to me, which was awesome. And he also sent me this beautiful, beautiful edition of The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. Gaston Leroux. See, I can speak French, Roger. See, it normally is here in this nice box on my shelf, but I took it down to show you because it's so incredibly pretty. And this is from the Folio Society, this edition of The Phantom of the Opera. And I love it. I think it's just wonderful. Both of these books did not make the cut. See, here's the thing about Troy. Troy, if he really, really likes a book, he will spare no expense to get the fanciest edition he could possibly find. I mean, if a book he liked was bound in solid gold, he probably would buy it. But he'd be very critical once it gets to him because he's got high standards, Not just any book will go on his bookshelf. So, he'll get the book, the fancy pants, very expensive version of whatever book he really likes, and he'll look at it, he's got to check it out real good, make sure everything's all right, And then he'll put it on the shelf and he'll kind of stand back, look at it. No, that'll never do. Get it out! Get it out of here! That's what will happen sometimes. And he will cast away books. And I wish he would do it more often because maybe I would get more books from Troy. Because, to me, this is like, look how pretty this is. It's so pretty. That's me. I'm not quite as exacting in my standards as Troy Tradup. So, I always get excited when Troy sends me something. And it was a smaller package, so I thought maybe it was an early edition of his new book of poetry that's coming out. I was like, well, that's pretty exciting. But it wasn't. It was one of the weirdest things anybody's ever sent me. As far as books, it's not the weirdest thing, but it's pretty weird, and that's this. This is Tarzan at Mars Core. Tarzan at Mars Core. And so I am doing a video on this book, Tarzan at Mars Core, because I'm pretty sure no one else ever has. This is Tarzan at Mars Core by Edward Hirschman. Edward Hirschman wrote this book. And Troy sent a little note of explanation. Troy's note here. Michael, saw this completely bananas ERB ripoff last night at Half Price Books and knew it needed to find its way to you. Hope it's awesome, or at least crazy enough to be enjoyable. Hope all is well. Regards, Troy. Troy took one look at this and knew that if I were buying books right now and had seen this at the bookstore, that I would, of course, buy it. And he sent it my way. But it's an odd thing. But let's talk about this odd thing, Tarzan at Mars Core by Edward Hirschman, because this is the product of an earlier age. This was printed spiral bound. When was this printed? 1977. It says here, first commercial printing, February 1977. 2,000 copies only, which is kind of amazing. There are 2,000 copies of Tarzan at Mars Core. And I say that this is a product of an earlier age because this is fan fiction. You know, it's Tarzan fan fiction. And a fan production, an Edgar Rice Burroughs pastiche. And I haven't checked, but I bet that there's an awful lot of this kind of thing available now because of, you know, the internet. And you can write your own Tarzan novel and you could sell it as an ebook probably on Amazon or whatever. You can have print-on-demand copies made of your fan fiction if you want. And there are a gazillion websites that'll publish your fan fiction. So if you're going to write something like this, and this is pretty common nowadays, you have an easy outlet. But back in these days, back in the 70s, it wasn't so easy. And so it's sort of admirable that this was put together by Edward Hirschman. And 2,000 copies of this were printed, spiral bound. And it's just such an interesting curiosity. So Tarzan, who in this novel apparently goes to Mars Core, I haven't read this book yet, but that just means I get to join the, you know, long and honorable list of booktubers who talk about books they haven't read. But I will read this. I just got it in the mail today. And it just fascinated me so much I had to talk about it. So what is this about anyway? And who is this Hirschman guy? And what's the deal with this novel? It appears to be Tarzan holding a stick. It doesn't look like a knife. It looks like he's holding a stick. It also looks like it's really windy in this cave. And it looks like there's a sloth hugging his leg. Is that what's going on? I think maybe that's what's going on. That's interesting right there. But what is the plot of this novel? Edward Hirschman, obviously an Edgar Rice Burroughs fan, wrote this book. Within Mars is a world of a central sun. So this sounds familiar. It sounds like what's in the Earth, according to Edgar Rice Burroughs, a central sun in the middle of the Earth, at the Earth's core. But it is a dying world with little light and frequently heavy rain. Alien beings there have among them a genius. By almost any standard, he's a genius. Who makes it possible for his kind to seek out another world for a new home. But what world would be best? That's a good question. What world would be best? Can't be this one. Only an idiot would come here. In trying to answer that question, Tarzan is inadvertently brought to the inner world of Mars. Sucks to be you, Tarzan. The aliens are arrogant and sadistic. Moreover, beings such as Tarzan are used by them either as slaves or for food. Therefore, a tense chain of events is set into play. How is Tarzan to remain alive and free, and yet obtain a position where he might use the alien technology to return to his own world and his mate? Every bit of his strength and ingenuity is drawn upon for furtherance of his aims. Wow, that sounds like something. So This is a Tarzan book. It has a foreword describing that Tarzan at Mars Core is a work that unifies by way of skillful extension, not one for false modesty, Edward Hirschman, the three major themes on which Edgar Rice Burroughs wrote: Tarzan, Earth's Core, and Mars Adventures. Actually, he wrote a lot more than that. In it, the style, format, and variety of material used by ERB is followed closely. Is it, though? Well, let's see. Oh, it has more to say that I should mention this other thing. All readers will find that many surprises lie ahead. In retrospect, one cannot but wonder at how the watery and nearly dead inner world that is necessary for a compatible extension has been made to such an excellent forum for high adventure, for friendships that strike against even provoked prejudice, and for a boundless and eternal love between two people such as most couples want, but for which few are willing to strive. How about that? So we have the title page and stuff. So this is printed by the Deleithian Press. The Deleithian Press, whoever that was. But the printing is by NCG Copy Center. Thanks, NBC Copy Center. At 7309 Arlington Boulevard, Falls Church, Virginia. The cover illustration is by Phyllis Elaine Hirschman and Gail Ann Pressman. It took two of them to do this cover. I suspect Philip Elaine Hirschman is some sort of relation to Edward Hirschman. That's just my guess. This is also copyright 1975, 1976, 1977 by Edward Hirschman. All rights reserved. Could you copyright this, though? Because didn't Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated have the license for the Tarzan character? So I don't know. I don't know how it works. But Tarzan at Mars Core. So I'm just going to give you a little taste of this. We do have a pronunciation guide for all of the strange words you'll find in this book. And the first chapter is Strange Surroundings. Let us delve into this book a little tiny bit. Probably the only audio version you'll ever hear is this. With skill and cunning, with the skill... I suck at audiobook reading. With the skill and cunning of Sheeta the Leopard, a man whose nakedness was covered only by a loincloth, quietly stalked his prey. Suddenly, and with lightning quickness, he lunged from his cover and made his kill. You could probably have gotten rid of this suddenly. With lightning quickness, probably would have been enough. Then he lifted the carcass onto his shoulders and made his way to a branch in which he chose to enjoy his feast in the middle terrace of the forest. His knife cut the flesh into strips from which he sucked the delicious warm blood. Tarzan, kind of gross, that guy. And from which he bit off chunks of meat that he chewed but briefly before swallowing whole. So, you get a whole little bit there about Tarzan's eating habits, which are kind of disgusting. This was Tarzan at home in his domain. And though he was an English lord in his own right, he enjoyed shedding the vestiges of civilization to partake of the freedom of the jungle. Here there were no requirements of uncomfortable dress, and nor was there anyone to temper his actions or to guide the flow of his thoughts. Here his venison was not charred by fire, but fresh and filled with the flavor of life. He ate and was satisfied, whereupon he gathered leafy boughs with which to make a lair among the branches for a comfortable rest. Nightfall was less than an hour away. So that's the first page. So that's a taste of the writing. There are how many more pages? 151 more pages. So I read that first page, and I made some assumptions about this guy, Edward Hirschman. If you go on to Google and look for Edward Hirschman, you'll find nothing. I did find an article about this book that was on ERB Incorporated or something. Their website, I don't remember where I saw it, but it didn't really tell you anything about Edward Hirschman because nobody knows anything about Edward Hirschman except for what Edward Hirschman tells you about himself. My immediate assumption was that this was a kid. I figured this guy is probably 16, 17 years old. You know, he's probably a young Edgar Rice Burroughs fan. He wrote this in sometime between 1975 and 1977. So this is a time when Edgar Rice Burroughs was a lot more popular than he is now. You can go to any bookstore, pick up the entire Tarzan series, no problem. You know, it was a good time for that. And it was like that up until the 80s. But this guy is a serious Tarzan fan. He wrote his own Tarzan book. But I was wrong. It wasn't a kid. So about the author of Tarzan at Mars Core. Edward Hirschman was born in Agana, is it Agana or Agana? In Agana, Guam in 1950. So he was 27 years old when this was published. He has lived over much of the United States, including in Anchorage, Alaska, during the earthquake of 1964. His father, Max A. Hirschman, was a lawyer, mathematician, economist who knew the value of a good education and tried to give his children every opportunity for learning. Thus it was, some years ago, that when the author took a liking to the books of Edgar Rice Burroughs, these were purchased for his reading development. Certainly, his love and respect for Burroughs increased and persists into the present. Big Edgar Rice Burroughs fan, like myself. The author is himself a mathematician and economist, holding degrees in both disciplines. He doesn't have an English degree. I probably could have guessed that. His livelihood is by abstract modeling for the state-of-the-art life cycle costing of development aircraft. Is it costing or casting? I don't know. Aviation equipment and aircraft-related hardware for the Department of the Navy. This guy has a real job. He's doing stuff for the Department of the Navy about airplane stuff. So, he's got a real job, but he, like a lot of fans, spent a lot of time writing fan fiction and took the trouble to have his fan fiction published, spiral bound, at the local copy shop, printing 2,000 copies, I'm assuming at his own expense. I don't know who else would fund this. And somehow, this copy survived for years and years for Troy Tradup, the author of The Forsaken Boy, the greatest werewolf novel of the 21st century, to stumble upon and say to himself, this thing looks so dumb, I bet Mike would like it. And so he sent it my way. How about that? And now I'm making the first ever video about Tarzan at Mars Core by Edward Hirschman. Aren't you glad you tuned in? Man, I make some real masterpieces here on YouTube. Okay, guys. I probably won't see you until Sunday when I'll have my weekend reading report. And then Monday, I've got a Mythos Monday coming up if things don't go all wrong like they did this past week. Anyway, I'll shut up now. We'll catch you next time.